I was gone for 3 days. Just 3. When I pulled back into my driveway and saw police lights reflecting off my lake, a crowd of neighbors whispering behind yellow tape, and the HOA president screaming that I was destroying the community, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was a war, and somehow my own home had become the battlefield. I didn't buy this place to fight anyone. I bought it because I was tired. Tired in that deep, hollow way you get after a divorce where nobody really wins, where the house gets quiet, and you realize silence can be louder than yelling. 16 months earlier, I'd signed the papers on this property, 4.7 acres of land wrapped around a private lake, thick trees, still water. Lake Serenity. That name wasn't poetic marketing. It was a promise I made to myself. I work in software remote contracts, long hours staring at code. I wanted a place where the only thing demanding my attention was the wind on the water. Oakwood Ridge Estates looked perfect, quiet, orderly. An HOA, sure, but I'd lived under HOAs before. As long as I kept my grass trimmed and didn't paint my house purple, I figured I'd be fine. I kept to myself. No meetings, no drama. I waved politely, paid my dues, and spent my evenings on the dock watching the sun sink into the lake like it was being gently erased. Then came the trip, a routine server migration in Austin. 3 days. I barely checked my phone. When I got back, I was exhausted, already imagining that first quiet night home. I turned down my road, saw my house through the trees, and then my stomach dropped. There were people on my lake. Not kids fishing, not neighbors walking dogs. Grown men in khakis and polos, clipboards in hand, aiming laser measuring tools at my shoreline like surgeons. And standing there with them, one hand on her hip, pointing at my water like she owned the tide, was Veronica Hayes, the HOA president. I parked crooked. Didn't even shut the door properly. I jogged down the slope toward my gate, already annoyed, already confused. I reached for my lock, the old solid one I'd used since the day I moved in. Gone. In its place was a shiny silver padlock stamped with the HOA's security logo. My key slid in, didn't turn. I stood there for a second staring at it, my brain lagging behind reality. That's when I noticed the fence. Cut cleanly. Wire bent back just enough for people to step through. That was the moment anger kicked in. Hot, immediate physical. I pulled out my phone without thinking and hit record. Veronica noticed me almost instantly. She turned, that practiced smile already loading onto her face like a saved setting. She walked toward me slowly, confidently, like someone who had never been told no and fully expected today to be no different. "Mr. Jensen," she said, syrupy sweet, "welcome home." I asked her what the hell was going on. She didn't flinch. She gestured toward the lake, toward the men, toward a massive sign planted right at the water's edge. Premium waterfront parcel, for sale. Contact Oakwood Ridge, HOA. Her name printed in bold. She told me calmly that during my absence the HOA had reclassified my lake as community common property under a recent resolution. That they were accepting bids. That a developer was prepared to offer over $2 million for the water rights. She said it like she was reading a grocery list. I remember feeling something strange then, not just anger, but disbelief. Like my brain refused to accept that another adult was standing in front of me on my land, trying to tell me it wasn't mine anymore. I told her I owned the lake, that the deed was filed with the county, that HOA resolutions don't override recorded property law. For a split second, just a flicker, her eyes changed. Something cold passed through them. She knew. She absolutely knew. But then the smile came back tighter this time. "Deeds can be amended," she said. "Community needs evolve." One of the men, Mr. Smith, I later learned, nodded and commented on how fast the developer would move. He spoke like I wasn't even there, like I'd already been erased. That's when I told her she was trespassing, that she'd changed my lock without permission, cut my fence, advertised property she didn't own, and that I was calling the sheriff. Her composure shattered instantly. She backpedaled, called it a misunderstanding, suggested we discuss it at the next HOA meeting. I held the phone up, already dialing. I told her to get off my property. She stared at me with pure hatred, then spun around and stormed away, dragging the assessors with her. When the deputy left later after taking my statement, I knew something was wrong. A case number didn't feel like protection. It felt like paperwork. And paperwork doesn't stop people who think they're untouchable. That night I walked the fence photographing the cuts, the footprints, the sign. I was shaking not from fear, but from the realization that someone had waited until I was gone to make a move this big. I looked up at my house and saw the cameras. 8 of them tucked under the eaves. I'd installed them when I moved in. Not because I was paranoid, because I'm methodical. I like data. And suddenly I wondered what they'd seen. The next morning my inbox exploded. 45 emails. Veronica had emailed all 150 households. An urgent notice. My lake shaded blue on a map labeled as a pending community amenity. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just about land anymore. She was turning the neighborhood against me. For a moment, just a moment, I sat there staring at my screen, wondering if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe fighting the HOA was a losing battle. Maybe selling, taking the money, walking away. Maybe that would be easier. That thought scared me more than Veronica ever could. So I got up and went on offense. County Recorder's Office. My deed was clean. No amendments, no HOA filings. Sir, the clerk said an HOA can't do what you're describing. Public records search. No resolution matching the one Veronica cited. It didn't exist. She'd made it up. Then I found the real reason. A proposed boutique resort. 50 rooms. Exclusive waterfront access. Approval contingent on securing legal water rights. And the company behind it, Veronica Hayes, was a 30% owner. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. This wasn't for the community. This was theft, dressed up as governance. That night I logged into my security system. The footage loaded slowly. Tuesday afternoon, less than 6 hours after my flight left. Veronica walking through my cut fence, sitting on my bench, spreading papers, practicing signatures, then signing a document, calmly, confidently, like she'd done it before. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. That wasn't HOA overreach, that was a felony. I called a lawyer the next morning. Expensive, ruthless, exactly what I needed. He watched the footage once, then leaned back and told me she was looking at prison time if this went the distance. We sent letters. Cease and desist. Quietly let her know what I had. She didn't back down. She escalated. Threats, fines. A fake easement filed against my property dated years before I bought it, signed by a man who had died. That was the moment I felt truly overwhelmed. Tired, angry, alone. I remember sitting on my bed, head in my hands, thinking maybe this was too big. Maybe I should have just taken the check. But then I tracked down the previous owner's daughter. She told me her father had refused to sell the lake, that it was his life. I sent his real signatures to a forensic expert. They didn't match, not even close. When the detective assigned to my case reviewed everything, her face hardened. This was criminal, and not just against me. She'd done it to others. Elderly residents, absent owners. One woman's backyard had been rented out behind her back, money flowing straight into Veronica's personal account. That's when something shifted in the neighborhood. People started asking questions. An emergency HOA meeting was called. The room was packed. Accusations flew. Evidence was presented. Veronica stood there rigid, defiant until the vote came down. 95 to 15. She was removed. I thought it was over. 2 hours later, men showed up at my gate claiming to be community patrol. They weren't. They were landscapers, paid by Veronica, arrested on the spot. The final night came quietly. Too quietly. I hid in my boathouse, watching the live feed on my phone. Shadows crossed my property. Tools glinted. And then Veronica herself stepped into view, supervising. "Start with the dock," she said. The sound of wood splintering felt like a punch to the chest. Police lights flooded the property seconds later. Chaos. Shouting. Handcuffs. Veronica screamed that it was private HOA business. The detective read her the charges. Forgery. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted destruction of property. As she was led past the neighbors, her power gone, she shouted about money, about opportunity, about how they'd all regret choosing me. No one answered. Months later, the court delivered its verdict. Prison. Restitution. Permanent removal from any position of authority. But that part didn't matter as much as the moment weeks later when I walked down to my dock, unlocked my gate, and sat by the water again. The lake was still, unchanged, patient. She thought she could take what wasn't hers. She was wrong. And the lesson is simple: power only works when no one challenges it.